Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Welcome back to M&A Unplugged. I'm your host, Domenic Rinaldi. While deals can't be secured during your first meeting with a business owner, they sure enough can be lost. Knowing how to prepare for and conduct an initial meeting with a business owner might not seem like a big deal, but in my almost 20 years, I have seen many buyers blow their opportunities in these first meetings. In today's episode, I'm going to provide a best practices overview on how to have a successful first meeting with an owner and why this is so critically important to getting a deal done. I will be discussing things like how to properly introduce yourself, goals of an initial meeting, how to properly prepare, the most important questions to get answered in that first meeting, also questions to steer clear of, and some of the challenges to first meetings in this COVID environment. You may be surprised by some of the advice, but trust me, if you follow this format, you will give yourself a leg up on any other buyers and build a reservoir of goodwill with the owner, which you may need to tap later on down the road. But before we get into today's episode, if you want to avoid the common deal pitfalls and the risk of losing substantial dollars, you need to know how ready you really are to buy a business. Because I believe proper preparation is so critical to your deal success, we have published a catalog of free resources to help you be better prepared. You can access these resources on our website at k2advisor.com/resources. That's K2, advisor.com/resources. Being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here and hope you enjoyed today's episode. So, as we talked about in the intro, having a goal for these initial meetings is so critical. And I have found over my many years that there are really two goals that rise above everything else for this initial meeting. And they are simply, first, you want to understand and determine a go, no-go decision at the end of this meeting. And go, no-go doesn't mean whether or not you're going to make an offer on the business, but go, no-go means, do you want to take the next step? Do you want to further the conversation? Whatever that is with the owner of this business. Is this a business you see yourself running? Can you sit in the chair of that current owner and see yourself running this business for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is? And if you're an existing business owner and looking to grow, is this sort of business the one that could fit nicely and tuck into your existing business or give you a leg up in the marketplace? And that's really what you should be determining in this first meeting. Is there a reason to go to the next step? And the second goal, which is of equal importance, is to build rapport. This may seem like a simple thing, but it's not. It could be tricky for people because you're in an interview environment where you're really trying to dive into somebody's business. And, that could be somewhat intrusive for a business owner. And so you have to really pay a lot of attention to building rapport. So how do you do this? Well, you do it by complimenting the owner. You do it by not putting the owner on the defensive. You want to, throughout this first meeting, do everything you can to make that owner comfortable, make them feel like they can trust you, because this will come back to pay you dividends later on if you decide this is a deal that you want to move forward with. So these really should be the overarching goals of any first meeting. One, determine if you want to go to the next step or not. And then two, do everything you can at every step throughout the process, this first meeting, to build as much rapport and goodwill as possible. Now, you're going to have challenges during this COVID environment, right? Many of these meetings are not happening in person. Now, maybe that's going to free up a bit as we all get vaccinated and we get to herd immunity. But right now, a lot of these meetings are happening over phone calls and Zoom. And what I would tell you is You want to do everything you can. If you can't meet in person safely, you need to do at least some sort of Zoom or video call. Conference calls just don't get you the ability to build the rapport that you need. So at a minimum, do a Zoom call or a similar type of video call, and do all you can to really make that environment as conducive as possible to building rapport. It's going to be a big challenge. It is for a lot of people. Some things will get lost in translation, so you're going to have to work harder than normal compared to meeting in person. And if you can safely meet in person, you really need to do that for a first meeting if possible. Okay, so let's get to meeting prep. So first off, if the business is represented by an advisor, you should be getting something called a SIM, or a confidential information memorandum, or a business overview, sometimes called the book. You should be pouring through this SIM with a tremendous amount of detail. Now, not all SIMs were created equal. Some are going to be, very short on details. Others will be pretty detailed. But you want to go through this document as closely as you can and really try to understand, where the business is at, where it's come from. If the business isn't represented by an advisor, then you're going to have to do your own homework. And then you're going to have to rely on research and researching through Google, potentially going to your library. And libraries are a tremendous source of research platforms. Many libraries will give you access to research platforms that would normally cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And because you're a member, you can get access to these research platforms. Example, Capital IQ is one such research platform that if you tried to buy into it, it would cost you tens of thousands of dollars. But many libraries have access to that for free. Not all, but many do. And so trying to do as much research as you can upfront on that industry is going to be really important. One, you'll get to understand, is this really an industry that fits for you? And it'll help inform you and help you develop better questions to be asking the owner during that initial interview. You should also be combing all of the business for sale websites to see if there are any similar types of businesses that are on the market. And if there are, gather as much information as you can about those businesses that are on the market and compare it to the business that you're looking at. What are the similarities? What are the differences? Look for gross profit margins, bottom line, where are the percentages in that business versus those businesses versus the one that you're looking at. The other one that I'll point to is, and so important nowadays, is what is the web presence of that company? And not just their website and how well it's done, but do they appear in Google searches? Or do they have a Twitter presence? Are they on Instagram? Are they on LinkedIn? What are they doing from a social media and web perspective to get their business out there? Now, don't be alarmed if they haven't done a lot, because that might be a tremendous opportunity for you to come in and build the business up without having to spend a lot of money and reap some pretty significant rewards pretty quickly. That could be some low-hanging fruit that is clearly an opportunity for you to quickly grow the business. So not all warts on a business or things that they are not doing are reasons to leave a deal. They could be tremendous opportunities for you. So you really do your homework here, understand what their web presence is, and maybe you can develop some questions from that you're going to ask the owner about why they have or have not done certain things from an email marketing and web presence perspective. The next thing to prepare around is competitors. I would simply do some Google searches. I would look in the local area if you can get a hold of some trade organizations or associations that might have competitors listed. I would go to all of those websites and compare how your target company is to the other businesses that are in the local market. If it is a local market business, if it's a national business, I would be doing more of a national search to see what the national competitive landscape looks like. What kind of products and services are they offering compared to the products and services that your company's offering? Sometimes companies will list businesses that are their clients. You can compare what types of client lists they have. Sometimes they'll list employees so you can see what the employee bases might look like. So there's lots of information that you can gather as you do this research, and you should be, because it will help you develop better questions for when you do have that first meeting. All right, so you've done all your research, you've pulled together a preliminary list of questions, at least as it relates to the industry and the markets and so on and so forth. And now you're the day of, and you're at the meeting. The first place to start here is you want to introduce yourself properly. And I would tell you that you want to go first. And the reason you want to go first, rather than have the seller talk about their business, is you want the opportunity to set the tone for this meeting. Setting the tone, meaning putting the owner in a relaxed position. Taking down, there might be stress levels. You don't know what's going on with the owner. They might be feeling, mixed emotions about actually selling their business. They might be anxious. They might not be good with, interview questions. So this is a great opportunity for you to grab the reins, go first in a polite way, but really set the tone for the entire meeting. And I think the first place to start is provide a backgrounder on yourself. What have you done? If you own a business and this is an opportunity for you to grow your business, what your business does, potentially why this is a good fit into your business. And I would rehearse this backgrounder. You want this to be succinct. You don't want to ramble. You don't want to go on. You want to be thorough, but you want it to be clear and crisp and not drag on for 5 to 10 minutes. You should be able to do this easily in under 5 minutes. You want to talk about next the reasons why you want to buy a business. If it's your first acquisition, why this is so important. Maybe you come from a family of entrepreneurs, or you've always wanted to own your own business. Or you own a business and you're looking to grow through acquisition, and you're looking to maybe for this business as a diversification player. Whatever the reasons are, you want to get them out on the table so the owner understands, where you're coming from. And why specifically that owner's business is of interest to you. Now, you may not know a ton about the business at this point in time, but you know enough probably that you can say why on the surface the owner's business is of interest to you. Maybe it's an industry you've been looking at for a long time, or it's an industry you have a lot of experience in. Whatever it is, why does that business in particular interest you? Next thing I would do is I would quickly cover up what you've done to actually prepare to do a transaction. So I'm going to make an analogy here, as much as I don't like to make this analogy, because buying a business and buying a home are not the same thing. They're not even close. But much like when you go to buy a home, you get pre-qualified for a loan. When you're looking to buy a business, you should be doing some of the same things. So what do I mean by that? You should have a team assembled. You should have an M&A advisor. You should have an M&A accountant, M&A attorney. You should have a lender or lenders identified. Should have your team pretty much pulled together. And you want to communicate. You don't need to share names and who they are, but you want to communicate with the owner that you've done this preparation so that if this is the right deal, you're prepared to move quickly. Now, why is that important to an owner? Because an owner doesn't want to know or think that their business is going to sit on the market for a long period of time. They want to know that once they find the right buyer, that buyer can move quickly through the process. The quicker that a deal can get done, the better for everybody. And so stressing this point and communicating this will be music to the owner's ears. As I mentioned earlier, you want to compliment the seller. So this is a great opportunity while you're in your intro to compliment the owner. If they've run a business for 20, 30 years, it's a great opportunity to tell them, that you think that's an unbelievable accomplishment. And believe me, it is. Most businesses fail inside of 5 years. And if you've been able to run a business for 20 to 30 years, you've weathered your fair number of storms. You've done a lot to keep that business going and thriving. And so it's a big deal. And the more you tell the owner that, I mean, you don't have to repeat yourself, but the more of those types of compliments that you pay to the owner shows both respect for what they've done and the fact that you'd be a good steward potentially of what they've built. And then lastly, during this intro, I'd invite the owner to ask you any questions that they may have about anything you've talked about or your background or whatever. Again, it's another great opportunity to bring the level of anxiety potentially of that owner down. And maybe they'll have some great questions, and it'll be a great opportunity for the two of you to bond about, who knows, maybe sports teams come up, or families, or vacation. Amazing what sorts of things can come up in that initial questioning that could give you an opportunity to each bond. Then after you provide the intro, you should be looking for the owner to provide you an overview of their business, how they started it, or if they bought it, when they bought it, and what they've done with the business from the time they started it or bought it till now, and how they generally operate it. It's probably going to be a high-level overview. They're probably not going to go into a ton of details, although some owners can really, once they have the opportunity to start talking about this, they're off to the races, and it might drag on for a while, but that's okay. The more information that you can get at this stage, the better. And I tell you to show up with a pad and paper and a pen, and write notes, and let the owner know that you're going to write notes, just so you can reference back later on, because you're going to get a lot of information, and you can't be expected to remember all of it. So take some good notes about the high level important stuff that you can reference back later on. Okay, so once the owner is done providing an overview, now it's your opportunity to ask questions. Ask questions about the owner's business. And there are some really key questions that you should be asking here. But let me first start with what you should not be asking, and where you should not go with this conversation, because what you do ask is just as important as what you don't ask. So one thing you don't want to do is be asking any sorts of questions that would put the owner on the defensive. Look, there's plenty of time, if you're suspect around some items or issues or financials or whatever, during due diligence, to dive deeper and ask, deeper diving questions. But now is not the time to do that. You want to keep this high level. Again, you're just trying to determine, is this a go, no go to the next stage? And so, keeping the owner off the defensive is of primary importance here. So don't be asking anything that's going to cause the owner to, get defensive and shut down and not answer your questions completely. The other thing you never want to do in this initial meeting is negotiate in any way, shape, or form. Shouldn't be asking about the purchase price, how they arrived at it, would they take a note, would they take an earnout? This is not the time for that. Again, I want to go back to your two major goals. You want to determine go, no go, and you want it to next stage, not that you're even going to make an offer, and you want to build rapport. Negotiating in this first meeting will set you back with this owner. It'll put them on the defensive, and there's no reason to do it at this point in time. So stay away from anything that's defensive, and anything that would even, equate to some sort of negotiation or questioning the terms that they're asking for, or the price that they're asking for. Stay clear of that stuff. All right, so let's get back to the questions that you do want to get answered. First on my list, and it may not be the first question you ask, but number one on my list is, why is the owner selling now? What has compelled them at this point in time to either put the business on the market or engage in a conversation with you if you happen to just find them and they weren't on the market for sale? The answer to this question is so critically important. I have a friend who calls it the sailboat test. And the sailboat test is simply, does that owner have something that's pulling them away from the business? Sailboat, a ranch, grandkids. You're looking for, what is the motivation for that owner to be stepping away? And if they don't have clear motivation, you want to take note of that, because at the end of the day, this might not be a truly motivated owner. And you don't want to dive deep here. You don't have to get into more details at this point in time, but understanding whether or not there is something that is pulling them away from the business is of critical importance. And I'll tell you, because if not, what may happen is you could have seller's remorse somewhere down the road, and it could come early in the deal, or it could come the day of closing when they pull out of the deal. And that is after you've spent a lot of time, money, and energy, and you don't want that to happen. So this question is really important. The next question that I really love to get answered from owners is, what are their top 3 growth strategies? Now, they may not have 3, they might have 2, or they might have 1. But I always ask, what are your top 3 growth strategies? And the way I frame this is, if you were to, wind back the clock 10 years or 15 years, and you were younger and you still had all the energy you wanted to run this business, what are the top 3 things you would go pursue to grow the business, to double it or triple it? So important to understand what the owner would do. And you might want to dive in a little bit deeper. So if they say they develop a new product, you might want to dive in a little bit deeper to ask, what sorts of products, what would they be doing? Again, high level. This is not the time to dig in deep and really get down to granular strategies and all that sort of stuff. But you do want to understand at a high level what they do to grow the business. The next area that I really want to understand is, what are the major risks in the business from their perspective? Sometimes the way I'll frame this question is, what keeps them up at night? Are they worried about something that could happen to the business in the future, with or without, outside of their control? But what are the major risk factors from their perspective? Owners typically, I will just warn you, don't have a great answer to this question. And so you could decide if you want to ask it a different way, another time, to see if you can tease out something. But if they don't offer anything up, I'd take a note of it. It may be something you need to come back to later on, but at least you've gotten the question out there, and it may give them opportunity to think about it further, so that if you do make a decision to go further, you can come back and ask this question again, maybe in a slightly different way, attack it a different way, to really understand, what may worry them about the business. The other thing the next area that you want to get into is the owner themselves. What is their day-to-day involvement in the business? What do they do? What parts of the business are they involved in? Can they take long vacations? Or do they need to be there day in, day out? How entrenched are they in the business? And you've heard me talk about this, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, in other episodes, about the more the owner is in the business day to day, the lower the value, because it means that there's risks. There's risks in transitioning the business from them to you. There's risks that if they have client relationships, those clients could leave. Key employees come to rely on them. So again, this is not something that you need to terminate discussions around, but it's important to understand, and then understand how you would mitigate the risk if you decided to move forward. Understand who their key people are. They may be reluctant to name them by name, but you should at least understand, who do they rely on most from a position perspective in their organization. And then there might be a whole host of operational sorts of questions that you want to understand. How do they operate the business? How do they get new clients? What's their acquisition strategy? How do they maintain clients and keep them? What's customer service look like? All sorts of operational questions that give you a sense of, really how the overall business operates day in and day out. Again, I keep this at a high level, but go through it and really understand. And again, if you refer back to the confidential information memorandum, if there was one, hopefully you've been able to develop some questions from that around their operations, so you can reference the SIM, say, look, I saw this in the SIM. Can you speak more to this? Might want to talk about margins, whatever it is, but anything operational is on the table for discussion. Competition, great opportunity to ask them about their competition. If you've done your homework, you might even want to ask them about specific competitors and what they think of those competitors, and do they lose deals to those competitors, so on and so forth. See what their perspective is on the competition. And then lastly is their view of the industry and the outlook for the industry. Look, they've probably been in this industry for a long time. They may have been involved at the association level, if there is an industry association. And so they're going to have some perspectives. and you're going to want to hear what their perspectives are. And so hopefully, that's going to take you, a good probably 45 minutes potentially to an hour to get through all of that. So, this can be lengthy. And I would tell you again, you want to make sure that anything you're asking in a very polite manner. Compliment along the way if you can, if they answer, some questions where, it's clear that they've done an outstanding job. Okay, so at this point in time, the first meeting is coming to a close, and you've probably during the meeting gotten an impression of whether or not you want to take the next step or not. If you don't want to take the next step and you're certain of that, I would be very polite and tell the owner at that point in time that you really appreciate their time, that for whatever reasons, it just isn't a fit for you. You don't think you could be successful. You're not certain that, this is the right fit for you. It's better to just let the owner know at that point in time if you have no intention of taking a next step. If you do have an intention of taking a next step, I'd simply state that. I'd say, look, I really like what I've heard. I think I'd like to take the next step. I don't know maybe exactly what that is at the moment. I want to go through my notes and digest everything that we've talked about today. I really enjoyed meeting you and getting to know more about your business. Again, congratulations on running it for 20, 30, whatever it is. And if you give me a few days, I'll be back to you and maybe we could talk about next steps. So at least they know that you like the business, you want to take a next step, you're just not clear about what that is. And so that gives everybody some clear idea about what's going to happen. Now, what you do next will depend on a whole host of things, and it's outside of the scope of this episode to, suggest maybe what those are. But if there is going to be a next step, if you are interested, it's important to make sure that the owner knows that. All right. So let me cap this off with some comments about how to keep good vibes going. If you've taken hopefully one thing away from this episode today, it's that this first meeting, you really want to do all you can to build goodwill with the owner of the business and build rapport. And you want to keep those good vibes going. So I'm going to make some suggestions here. One, hire a third party to do the heavy lifting and the dirty work, because there is going to be heavy lifting and there's going to be dirty work. And if you wind up doing that yourself, you're going to wind up chipping away at your goodwill and the rapport that you've built. You don't want to do that. You'd rather have a third party to do that, whether it's an M&A advisor or your attorney or whatever, but you're going to want a third party that can deal with the owner or their representatives and do a lot of that so that you can maintain your relationship with the seller throughout the process. Now, let me tell you why that's so important. So important because I guarantee you there are going to be speed bumps along the way. I've been doing this a long time. There are just no deals that don't have speed bumps, whether it's something pops up in the financials or operationally, or it's hard to get the bank loan because of the way the owner has maintained their finance. Whatever it is, I promise you there's going to be speed bumps. Training and transition. It'll come at you from all different angles, but there will be speed bumps. The only question when there's a speed bump is it material enough to cause you to walk away from the business and terminate your interest? And if not, you need someone else who can help you get over the speed bumps and those difficulties so that you can maintain rapport. Why this is so important is if the owner continues to know, like, and trust you throughout the process, the odds are that you're going to get past those speed bumps and those issues. And there may come a time where you do actually have to pick up the phone. You've gotten to the 11th hour in the deal, and there are a couple of speed bumps and advisors haven't been able to get past them. But you've got all that reservoir of goodwill, and now you can pick up the phone, and the owner knows that they can trust you because you've been professional throughout the process. Now you can pick up the phone and have a one-on-one discussion with the owner and hopefully get past whatever those issues are. And I promise you, if you've built up goodwill, you've got a great shot at getting past those issues. If you haven't built up goodwill or you've eroded that during the diligence phase and the negotiation phase, it is going to be much harder for you to ask for things from the owner when the deal gets down to the closing table. So I know this may sound to some like a trivial point, but I can tell you, I've seen owners walk away from deals because there wasn't enough goodwill maintained throughout the deal. And the owner knew they had a good business and they could easily go find another buyer. And that's exactly what they did. They terminated the transaction and left the buyer with nothing but a lot of legal bills and a lot of effort that went nowhere. So maintain goodwill, maintain your rapport. And then if you have to dip into the reservoir, dip in the very tail end of the process when you really know that it's a go, no go to get the deal closed, that you need to actually pick up the phone and talk to the owner specifically. Hopefully this information helps you have much more productive first meetings with owners and increase your odds of getting a deal done when you decide it's the deal you want to do. I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.